there! Welcome to the A Jesus Church podcast. You're listening to a teaching from our Sunday gathering. We exist to join God in the renewal of all things by becoming a unified, spirit-filled family that follows the way of Jesus. And our desire is to come alongside you to encourage and equip you for that journey. So if we can serve you in any way, please reach out to us through our website at jesuschurch.org/connect. As always, we hope that this teaching increases your hope and deepens your faith.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are we all doing? Okay, that's one person I heard who stopped talking and is paying attention. I see you.
Thank you.
Well, would you stand? We are going to read a bit of the Bible that we're going to be teaching from today. We want you to be able to follow along. So if you don't have a Bible, wave your hand in the air. Someone will give you a Bible so you can follow along with us. And we're going to be in a couple of different places today. So you're going to want to stick a finger in the book of Judges and in the book of Genesis. We want to keep you on your toes. It's been too easy recently. Just opening your Bible, having it on your lap. We're going to improve the Bible dexterity this morning. So let's read. So we've got our verse from Hebrews because we're in this cloud of witnesses series this summer, looking at all of these characters that are in Hebrews 11. Yeah. And then we're going to look at a verse in Judges for Samson and in Genesis for Joseph, our two characters today. So let's read Hebrews 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Then in Judges 16, at the end of his life, Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more. And let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my two eyes."
And in Genesis 50, 19 through 20, but Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, you can take a seat and I'll pray. Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity to come together and to look at your word, to meet these different characters that have such beautiful and powerful stories. I pray that you'd impact us with their stories today. Amen.
Amen. Well, this week, you've got two of us to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
And some of you might not have met Celtin. Celtin, he's been around here a long time. I mean, you grew up in this church.
That's true,
so,
a long time.
Yeah, when I first came here, you were...
True, I was here.
Much smaller. Mm-hmm. I wish I could tell some embarrassing stories, but I can't really remember any.
That's true. But, we don't have time either, so it'd be hard.
But Celtin recently has been one of our residents, and he's just joined our youth team full-time, which is really awesome.
Exciting,
so congratulations to Celtin.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really exciting to have another young leader being raised up and stepping in. We're really glad that you're sticking around.
Thank you.
And so as we've been continuing this cloud of witnesses stories, it was interesting having a chat. Celtin has been thinking about how we respond to suffering and how that affects kind of the story we feel like we're living in. And he'd been thinking about Joseph. And I'd been thinking about the role that suffering plays in forming our faith in the life of Samson. And they're in Hebrews 11. And we thought, actually, they're a really unlikely pairing. They lived very different lives, but it could be really interesting to look at these two together. And there's so much about them, really intriguing characters. We won't cover the half of it today. So number one tip is go read about them this week. Take this morning as something to kind of spur some thoughts. Hopefully God gives you a little thread to go tug on, and then go get into the word, read about them this week. So I'm going to start with a quick refresher on Samson, and you'll find his story in Judges chapters 13 to 16. And it's a very strange story. Samson had a miraculous birth. His mother couldn't have children, and an angel came to announce that she would bear this son, Samson, and along with the announcement came a calling and a condition. So the angel said to her in chapter 13, verse 4 and 5, "Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." So Samson, this miraculously born boy, is going to be a Nazarite, a person consecrated to a special purpose. And this dedication is an expression of faith, being committed to something God wants to do and living differently because of that. And the living differently was the demand God would make of Samson, to keep the conditions of the Nazarite vow by not drinking and not cutting his hair. And what God is going to do is to use Samson to deliver the people of Israel from their Philistine oppressors. And this is Samson's great calling, literally the calling he's born to. And to fulfill this calling, God gives Samson the gift of supernaturally great strength. And then Samson goes on to have a 20-year career as the deliverer of Israel, filled with some really strange incidents. He fought a lion and tore it in half, as you do. He fought the Philistines with a fleet of incendiary foxes. So, kind of strange warfare tactics. He defeated an army with the fresh jawbone of a donkey, because you wouldn't want to use one that's old and gone off, right? It's got to be a fresh one. He carried a huge city gate of a Philistine city up to the top of a hill to embarrass and humiliate them. And he had a string of problematic dalliances with enemy women. His story is really sad. It's filled with tragedy and violence, betrayal, mistrust, and loss. It's not good Sunday morning fodder for let's feel good about life. It's just really sad. Yeah. Samson is a very mixed character with confused motivations. He often blends his calling to be a deliverer with his desire for personal vengeance. He lives a divided life. And a major theme is the powerful force that broken expectations play in a life that is largely focused on self-fulfillment through self-indulgence. Intriguingly, though, in the midst of deep brokenness, God is still using Samson. Now, the other standout theme is Samson's mistrusting relationships with the women that he objectifies for his own pleasure. And as Samson exploits women for his desires, they in turn exploit him, turning intimacy into a weapon against him. And Samson's story ends in the bed of a Philistine woman, Delilah, and she's trying to discover a way the Philistines can destroy him. And he keeps lying to her. But ultimately, he ends up defeated. The Lord having departed from him, and he's using his remaining strength as a prisoner to grind flour for his enemies, really far from fulfilling his calling. But the story doesn't end there. He finally turns to the Lord. And we do finish with him being successful in his calling, defeating the Philistines. Now, a big theme there, problematic relationship, encounter with a woman. Yeah. This is not unique to Samson's story. No. This is in Joseph's story too, but things go really differently for him.
True.
So give us a refresher on Joseph.
Yeah, of course. Well, as Richard did with Samson, I'll be doing a quick reminder on Joseph's story. It takes place over the course of 13 chapters, so he's got quite a long story in the Bible, found in Genesis 37 to 50. Many of you, whether you grew up in church or didn't, have probably heard of the story of Joseph. I mean, the guy with the coat of many colors. They made that movie about him, right? It's the lesser to Prince of Egypt. It's the lesser. But hey, homie got a DreamWorks movie. That's like crazy. That's pretty good. So a lot of us, we know Joseph's story. Or we think we do. We meet him, this young 17-year-old boy, so arrogant. But most of them are. So it's like, how can you blame him? But he's not set up very well, though. I'm sure no one in this room can relate, but in his family, there was extreme favoritism. His dad had a favorite wife, Joseph's mom, i.e. Joseph being the favorite son, and his 10 brothers, they hated him for it. Joseph walking around in his coat of many colors, a gift from his dad, a symbol of his father's favoritism. The dreams, they didn't help either. From that young age, God gave Joseph an immense gift of having God dreams, the kind of dreams God uses to equip his people for the tasks he has for them. But going back to that 17-year-old arrogant boy thing again, Joseph didn't really know how to use his gift or talk about it. So often it would involve lots of gloating and an even greater growing hatred among his brothers towards him. And so one day, Joseph went to go check on his brothers out in the fields, wearing his coat, as you would if you had one. And his brothers, they see him on the horizon. The coat's a little obvious. And they come up with a plan to kill him. They're done with the favoritism. Joseph arrives, they grab him, they tear off his coat, and they throw him into a pit. The text doesn't tell us here, but later we get more info that the young 17-year-old Joseph, he's crying. He's begging his brothers to stop. It's a horrible scene. This isn't an innocent story. Joseph in the coat of many colors. He doesn't actually have that coat for very long, though. It's taken from him very quickly. His brothers wouldn't end up killing him, but they would just sell him as a slave. It's not much better. And the resume of Joseph's pain and suffering building as he makes the long march to Egypt, a place where more suffering would continue. But the cracks of God's redemption and healing would begin to shine. He would go as a slave, but be quickly promoted to second in command of his owner's household. That, again, though, wouldn't last long, as the head of the household's wife, as Richard was alluding to, would try to seduce him. And because he refused, and she falsely accused him of trying to rape her, and then he was sent to prison, a place where he would linger for a long time, forgotten and alone. Some crazy stuff happens in the prison involving some more dreams and Joseph interpreting them, which we can't get into now. But I echo the words that Richard said at the beginning. I encourage you to read these stories. They are powerful and beautiful, and we only get tastes of in this teaching, but please go read the stories of Joseph and Samson in your free time. And through some wild circumstances of the Pharaoh having a dream, a big theme in Joseph's life, that no one in the whole land of Egypt can interpret except for Joe. He is released from prison and actually put in charge of the plan to save Egypt from the coming famine that we learned about in the Pharaoh's dream. As basically second in command of Egypt, and honestly, Joe is kind of killing the game now. The text even tells us repeatedly that God is with him. Joseph walks the nation through the years of abundance and the years of famine that follow in the land. And during the intense years of famine, Joseph gets a visit from his brothers because they're actually looking for food, because all the nations surrounding Egypt, they're in the famine too, and Egypt's prepared, so they have the food. So his brothers, they come to visit for food, not knowing that Joseph is actually alive and that homie's like the whole head of this whole operation. And through some crazy and insane interactions and powerful moments, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and they reconcile. Well, kind of, sort of. We'll get to the full parts of that in a minute. But when you look at these two characters at a glance, you might be thinking, man, I got to act like Joseph, and I got to not act like Samson. But the point isn't to be like Joe and to not be like Sammy. They're both in Hebrews 11, this like hall of faith that we're talking about. They both have faith that we should be inspired by, but they have two radically different journeys of that faith. Both of their stories, they linger in suffering, and their faith is formed by it. Their stories even give us questions to ask ourselves about our own experience of suffering and how that affects our faith.
Yeah, so let's begin with Samson and think about his faith formation, okay? So we're going to dive into the pit. It's pretty bleak, but we're going to see God do something through the experience. So Samson's story is one of declining trust. His first love is this Philistine woman who uses her relationship with him to pry the secret answer to a riddle from him. And then she betrays his trust, sharing that secret with the enemy at great cost to Samson. And it's interesting that at the end of his life, in the bed of Delilah, there is nothing she can do to get truth out of him. But it's not just the pain of his first betrayal that makes Samson this way. He is consistently moved to action because of how the Philistines have affected him personally, not because of how they are affecting the nation whose champion he is. Samson is self-absorbed, and the things that he suffers only seem to compound this focus on self. Perhaps this is why he's so often seeking solace in the arms of a prostitute, so close to intimacy and yet so desperately alone. It's a sadly common dynamic to see someone try to numb and escape pain only to end up alone, trapped in a world where only self matters. And Samson epitomizes this destructive pattern. But what's interesting for us is how this affects his faith. So there are 6 great feats of strength that Samson performs. 3 of these are closely related to him being the deliverer of Israel, to his calling. And 3 of them are more closely related with a personal vendetta. It's really interesting. The ones that tie to his calling specifically note that in those feats of strength, the Spirit of God rushed into him. And he was aware of this. But that detail is absent in the episodes that are more prominently just a vendetta. And this is a clue to where closeness with God and experience of God was rooted for Samson. Now, throughout his life, Samson does depend on God. Like one of the most sort of intriguing instances is at the end of a long battle when he's exhausted and he calls on God out of his thirst. And God does answer. He miraculously provides for him. But there's something strange going on. There is no invocation, no plea, no petition in Samson's approach to God. It's more of an entitled demand that reveals this proud attitude of feeling his own indispensability to God, that God actually depends on him. God needs him to deliver Israel. And this is really important because this contrasts and is very revealing in Samson's last prayer. And by the end, with Delilah, as she keeps on asking him, what's the secret of your strength, seeking to find a way to destroy him, after a catalogue of lies, he eventually spills the beans. And he says this in Judges 16. He tells her, no razor has ever been used on my head because I've been a Nazirite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. But here's the thing, that is just another lie. He is not trusting Delilah. She has not worn him down to a point of finally telling the truth. He knows that whatever he tells her, she will use to destroy him. That's the pattern. And he's not ready to die. And it's really telling that he understands this, because when the Philistines do rush in after his head has been shaven, he expects to get up with great strength and defeat them like normal. He is not expecting that his strength will have failed. And spotting what kind of lie this is tells us a lot about the decline of Samson's relationship with God. Samson knows that his great strength comes from God, not his hair. Seems obvious, but really important. After all, once his hair is regrown, once he is a prisoner of the Philistines, he knows that he needs to pray to God for God to return to him. His hair is not enough. He needs God. He's telling the truth about being a Nazirite, but he's lying about where he believes his strength comes from. He truly believes in proud arrogance and self-importance and self-absorption, that whatever happens to his hair will not affect his strength. Blinded by his attitude, he is unable to predict or even to perceive that God has departed from him. So why did God depart? Well, Samson's great sin was thinking that he could dispense with the condition God had given him. He presumes that God must give him the gift without any need for faithfulness to his calling and the condition attached to it. Now that sounds like an echo of Hebrews, right? The call to faith and faithfulness to a calling because of Jesus. His faith is malformed. It's entitled. He's depending on God, but mostly so that God can serve him and his needs. But thankfully, that's not the end of the story. Once Samson finds himself bereft of power, cut off from his calling, in an abject state of suffering, he turns to God. Through loss, through suffering, through the weight of these things, Samson is pushed to a new perspective. And he prays in Judges 16, the verse that we read at the start, saying, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." How his prayer has changed. No longer entitled, he pleads with God, asking, not demanding, allowing room for God's will, not just his own. Having in the past objectified and commodified God, just like the women in his life, he is now reformed by what he suffers. And God moves from being the person in whose hands Samson can place his whole life. Everything's changed for Samson. This is a moment of submission, a moment of pure faith where he rests himself alone in the mercy of his God. And his faith takes a giant leap forward. This is the moment of Samson's redemption. Even though it means his death, as God gives him the strength to push the temple pillars of this Philistine temple that he's the prisoner in apart, bringing the whole temple crashing down, killing him and the Philistines inside. It's the moment of greatest victory for his calling, finally disrupting Philistine power in the region. But more importantly, it is the moment of restoration in his relationship with God, where his faith puts his life back into God's hands. And that is an amazing example in Samson of how far faith can fall, of how much it can fail, and yet there can still be a way back to God.
Yeah, that's so good, Richard. You see that by the time we get to the end of Joseph's life, that arrogant 17-year-old boy, he's nowhere to be found. The man who he is now is one thoroughly shaped by his sufferings. He's a good dude. The little moments and the ways that Joseph responded to his pain, they marked the man who he would become later, a strong man. We get this story at the end of Joseph's life, after his brothers came to Egypt those few times, and then later moved there permanently with their dad. Well, their dad, Jacob, famous patriarch, he dies. And Joseph's brothers, they get scared. Well, maybe Joseph just forgave us because dad was alive. And now that he's gone, I put like the emoji in, it's like the 2 eye emoji. It's like look behind your back. Like now that he's gone, like they're scared he's gonna kill them for what they did to him when he was a little boy. Because remember, Joseph's got all the power now. So they hatch a plan. They give him this fake message impersonating their father, basically as his dying wishes. They make it up, demanding that Joseph would forgive them for the sin that they did to him. And we can't miss this moment right here. Sometimes in the Bible, there's moments when you've kind of got to stop. You got to really sit in it. You've got to lean in, or you'll miss it. The text tells us that Joseph receives the message from his brothers, this fake message. and he begins to weep. He weeps, you see, because his brothers, they don't get it. Joseph's a young boy, the tragic victim of his father's favoritism, stripped and beaten up by his brothers as he was begging them to stop, sold as a slave, approached by a powerful woman wanting to rape him, falsely accused, thrown into a prison to be forgotten, all alone. If anyone has the right to play the trauma card, it was Joseph. The right to be pissed at God, to blame God, to hold on to all the pain. It was Joseph. But we see at the end of his life something profound. He's free. He doesn't carry it. All the shame that his brothers have been dragging their entire lives, he doesn't carry anymore. All the pain, the trauma, the bitterness, he's free. It's why he's able to drop one of the most acutely aware to God's heart verses in the Bible as he says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? He's like, can I judge you? He's like, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. He's telling his brothers, what you intended for evil, the bad things that you did to me, God has made good. He's made new. He's done something with it. He's saved this entire nation of people from starvation through it. And if you take a look at Joe's family, not his immediate family, but the generations before him, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, basically his dad, grandpa, and great-gramps, they carry so much pain and trauma and lying and favoritism and stealing and cheating into the next generations. It's just kind of a pattern. You watch the son of the next son, they're just kind of doing the same sin. And it gets to Joseph, and he has this choice. He can carry on the family baggage, or he can have his faith formed by his suffering in a way that says, not with me, not with my brothers. I'm not going to carry this anymore. And brothers, you guys don't have to either. He's like, you can be free. That's why he weeps when he gets this fake message from the brothers that they've made up. He's like, guys, you don't have to carry this anymore. I let go of this. You guys, you can be free. He's been formed by his journey, formed by the way God met him amidst his pain, formed by his long nights in prison cells as one falsely accused, as a slave, as one rejected by his brothers. But in those moments, he didn't choose to see himself as the victim of his own story, but as a vessel of God's purpose amidst the story that God was writing. It wasn't always easy. I bet that Joseph was not singing Kumbaya in his prison cell. I bet you a lot. I bet he had many nights where he was furious with God, so confused, so scared. But when we see him here in the middle to latter half of his life, one of the last stories in Genesis, the Bible's first book, the story they want to kind of leave you with, he walks in freedom, not consumed by the past, while the story lingers with us wondering if the brothers ever really get it, if the brothers were ever free. Joseph, along with Samson and many other key Old Testament figures that we read about, we hear about in Hebrews 11, what we're talking about, they teach us a lot about what it means to have a strong faith, a bold faith, but also that faith or our faith formation is a journey. And tragically, suffering is a part of that journey. We all meet it. No one seems to go unscathed. Jesus puts it very clearly. In this world, you will have trouble. You will have troubles. And we can either walk as those who are free, like Joseph and even Samson, well, kind of like at the end, the very, very end. Or we could live like Joseph's brothers, our pain always haunting us, never able to escape what we did or what was done to us. The beauty of the faith that Joseph displayed, and even Samson in his final moments, is that there was a deep understanding of the fact that they were not a part of a story that was their own, or at least not inherently, but by living their lives as a part of God's story, and in God's story, suffering, evil, death, and pain, they didn't have the final say. Their sting would linger, yes, but as Jesus continues in John 16:33, in this world you will have trouble, yes, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. We walk as those who are free, not because we have won our freedom, but because we understand that Jesus, through his sacrifice on the cross, has overcome the world. That's the reality of the story we live in. It doesn't always make the pain go away, but we see that we've been invited into the story of a suffering God who walked out of the grave free. And we get to follow behind him in his footsteps as those who can be free.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think the sort of faith that Joseph and Samson have because of their suffering is a very countercultural faith in our culture. We feel strong, we feel hopeful together. It's hard for us to feel hopeful when we're weak. It's hard for us to feel like God's at work when things are painful, because our culture teaches us that we're at our best when we are like strong, self-sufficient, and comfortable. Lies. So I'm really glad that these guys are included in Hebrews 11 for us. And it's interesting in Hebrews 11, it gives us a list of people, but it also lists some of their attributes, what they were like, what happened with them. And there's a really telling phrase in verse 33 of Hebrews 11, where it talks about these people whose weakness was turned to strength. The way that Joseph had faith to see that God could be at work in his moments of great weakness led to moments of great strength. The way that Joseph finds hope in his pain, in his abasement, when he's locked in a prison, alters the course of the story and leads to his later strength that isn't for him, but actually saves so many people. And it's rooted in his faithfulness in those moments of weakness. In the moment of weakness, Joseph's faith didn't fail, but he chose to be faithful. And that changed the story. Samson too had this moment of great strength, both spiritual and practical, because of how his faith was active in the moment of deep weakness. And I love having these two side by side, because Joseph, you just keep watching him profoundly exercise faithfulness in weakness and pain, when we know we would have been a Samson already, right? Does anyone feel like they maybe associate a bit more with Samson, like trying to numb and escape pain? But that does not speak the depth of our journey, because Samson, through what he suffers, is able to get to this amazing place of victory as well. And that's why having these two together, I feel like Joseph's like the ideal, and Samson's like this is what happens when it goes pear-shaped. But God can still work, and we can really relate to that. So it's really important to have the ideal, like the North Star, and then be like, Samson is there. Here's how often we get there. Well, Paul discovered this as well. Writing in 2 Corinthians in the New Testament, Paul wrote about his experience of trying to serve Jesus and live on the mission of Jesus in a world that embattled doing this. And he said that Jesus said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
Yeah.
So when we suffer weakness, as we inevitably do, if you do not think you have any weakness, see me in Celtin afterwards. You are self-deceived. Okay, we'll have the spiritual gift this morning of pointing out your weaknesses. It's going to be really good fun at the doors. But when we do suffer weakness, what truth do we speak over ourselves? How do we feel about the narrative we live in when that's our experience? We need to be really cautious about allowing the experience of weakness to speak hopelessness over us, and instead engage our faith to look for Jesus' power that breaks out beyond the limit of ourself. We need to pay attention to the crucible of suffering, not trying to numb our way out of it. I wonder how many of us need to look back at pain that we have suppressed and buried under layers of self-indulgence and escapism and numbing, and reclaim that God may have had something to form us in through that experience. There may be hope, and God may still want to work in the midst of those things. And so these two characters, they call out to us with a profound set of questions this morning. And so let's stand together. We want to get curious with Jesus about what question he has for us today.
Thanks for listening. For more resources and to partner with us through giving, visit us at ajesuschurch.org.